Thank you very much for joining me again, Warren. It's good to have you back in the studio.
Always a pleasure, Shoes.
So, for our listeners, today we're going to turn things on their head. So, quite often in our podcast, we're talking about what you need to be doing, what you need to be thinking about doing, having a go at different things. And particularly for leaders, there's often that sense of, goodness me, how on earth am I going to fit that in on top of everything else I normally do? So this is good news from that perspective, because we're going to be talking about the things that leaders don't need to do, or perhaps if they are doing them, what they should probably stop doing, so that will free up the time and capacity and the thinking space to do the things they do need to do.
Brilliant. And actually, I'd like to say, Suze, I've got a lot of empathy and sympathy for leaders, because the path that leaders have to tread is a challenging one. There's lots of pitfalls. And actually, to avoid some of those pitfalls, actually, we do need uncommon sense. So hopefully we can bring a bit of that today.
I'm looking forward to it already. Thank you, Warren. Okay, take it away, Warren.
Okay, so the first thing on my list that leaders should not do is to keep the future unknown.
Okay.
In the organisation's eyes. So what do I mean by that? So lacking an underlying vision, or a clear vision for the organisation moving forward. Sometimes there is a vision there, but it's so high level. And lacks substance. It's to be the best. So it's more like a strapline than it is a vision.
Gotcha.
So for me, the vision actually it has to have substance. It has to have meaning to the staff. In a sense, it needs to be achievable, even though it may be in the long term. It needs to make sense, and ultimately, staff need to feel that it's a vision that adds value.
Yes, and that they can connect
involved.
with.
Yes. Promotes prosperity for all stakeholders involved, customers and staff alike.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I think what's very clearly joined to that, without that clear vision, it's very difficult for leaders to keep constancy of purpose.
Okay.
And when that happens, of course, when obviously things arise, challenges, there's always challenges that we have to overcome. But without that vision and that it's very difficult to keep that pathway, to keep that constancy of purpose. So we tend to get sort of a bit blown around. So which leads to constantly changing priorities, and staff don't like that, I don't think.
Yes, and it makes it difficult as well to execute improvements well. If the one you're working on is no longer considered to be a priority, then you have to switch to something else, and you have this sense of never finishing anything.
Yeah, it's both unsettling and confusing. When you're told that what you're doing is of value one week, and then to drop it the next week because something else has become the priority.
Yeah. Okay, great. Like that.
And I guess the final thing in this sort of first point is around then the strategy, or even the values. So the how do we go about achieving that vision? And again, often what I see is it's the strategy seems to be like a glossy presentation or some kind of poster.
Right.
And seems to lack that clear system or plan is to enable staff to understand exactly how do we move forward and how we're going to achieve that vision.
Yes. And of course, that is if it exists at all. I was working with somebody the other day, not a new business, but they don't have a strategy. And when I asked them, they were quite, suddenly then the question was, well, how do you know what the priorities are for you? Then that was difficult for them to connect with. And so we started to wind back and think about how we could help with the strategy side of it. So really important, because without that, as you say, and that not being connected to the individuals and the work they do, hard for them to get going with.
And actually, it's more common than one would think. actually at an organizational level, but also for me, it's important that we consider it from an individual leader perspective. I think all leaders should have their own vision, should have their own strategy. Of course, we want that to be connected to other leaders into the organization as a whole, but still, I think that's what, that's fundamental to leadership.
Definitely. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Second thoughts?
Okay, so my second point would be what leaders shouldn't do is misunderstand the contribution that people make in the organisation. And this one is a little subtle, but unconsciously, I often see leaders slip into this theory that 100% of the results are 100% attributed to the people.
Okay.
Rather than actually the people make a contribution to those results through the system. Okay. And there's a distinct difference in the two things in terms of how then that theory then drives behavior in thinking. As Deming always said, give a good person a poor process, and the process wins every time.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not just about people. Yes. So therefore, I personally find schemes like league tables. We rank people in terms of their performance. Incredibly unhelpful. They're destructive. They lower morale. They cause competition between people. Okay, and also they can encourage people to distort the system.
Well, I think that's the problem, isn't it? Because some people might say, well, isn't it healthy for there to be some competition? Well, to some extent, as long as those who can't win aren't distorting the system.
Yes. Because actually and is it winning, or is it just actually survival?
Yeah.
Particularly if you're in the bottom half of the table, you're below average in inverted commas.
Yes.
But interestingly, of course, somebody has to be below average, because that's the point of an average.
Indeed.
Yes. I mean, another clear one for me is this idea of setting objectives for people to take responsibility for, where actually their ability to actually influence directly to achieve that objective is very small, yet they're managed upon the performance against those objectives.
What do you think is going on there when that occurs? Is it something? Is it also quite often? I don't see individuals speaking up and saying, "How am I supposed to achieve that?"
I think because there's widespread sort of misunderstanding or lack of knowledge around an understanding of the need to recognize processes assets. We recognize people is our primary asset, and I would never argue with that. Okay, so we understand that we need to manage people, we need to focus them, we need to make sure they're well utilized and developed. But actually, people alone is not the answer. Okay, we have to ensure that actually the process in which they're operated is designed to support them, not get in their way. And I don't think often leaders are process orientated enough. By nature, they're focused upon the results rather than the methods that we use to achieve those results.
The first time you ever said to me about a process being considered an asset was an epiphany moment for me. So I really appreciate that. I use that all the time. Stolen with pride, Warren, I should just say.
My pleasure. And it frees the mind.
Yes, completely. Okay, thank you.
Good. Right. Number 3 on the list. Leaders should not tamper. Now, what's the definition of tampering? Well, one definition of tampering is taking action on a system that does not take action on the root cause. In other words, you make a change within the organization that doesn't address the root causes of performance. So what you're simply doing is adding change to your organization. So you're adding noise. which actually tends to create more variation, not less, make matters worse, not better. Typically, well, there's many reasons why tampering happens, and let me say now, this is not a conscious thing. Leaders don't go out to make matters worse. We tamper actually not because we're not doing our best or trying to do our best. It's because of our understanding. And so, for instance, overemphasis on short-term results, simply reacting to the here and now all the time, single data points without putting that data into the context of long-term performance can lead us to knee-jerk and think that we've got something special here that needs to be reacted to, when in a sense, when we look at it in context, actually it's not special, which would lead us to a different type of action.
Okay. And it's very different to containment in the event of a bad event.
Absolutely.
There are two different ways of looking at this, and containment is absolutely appropriate should that happen.
Oh, indeed. Yes, we have to contain, we have to correct, but then we have to push for prevention. Okay. And that requires us to really understand what's going on. And that brings me to my second point, why tampering can be so common and often happen. And again, it touches upon something we said earlier about this idea of, the job of a leader often is seen as about focusing upon the results rather than focus upon the method that got to those results. So without focusing upon the method, how we got here, we're not really going to do good root cause analysis, and therefore our solutions often are not focused in the right areas. Okay, number 4 on the list is around creating competition rather than cooperation, and we touched upon this earlier. Of course, all these things are interrelated, of course.
Yes.
So, again, a good solid management and leadership theory, management by objective. What we do is we take our overall objectives, we break them down into what we consider to be standalone objectives, and then what we do is we allocate those to people and we say, you're responsible for this. Now, of course, any good employee is going to want to work hard, to achieve their objective and protect that at any costs. But in truth, it's very rare that objectives stand alone when they're broken down from a larger objective. They interact. Yes. They're interdependent. So all you're doing is actually creating competition between people, teams, and departments, not cooperation.
Yes.
So seems like a common sense idea, but go careful.
Okay.
And then when you're on the other side of that, of course, it's that reinforcing that silo mentality, making sure that you achieve your objectives, regardless of what's going on overall. It's the idea of actually the hole isn't in my end of the boat, so hey, I don't need to worry about it.
Yes. Which again can be distorting the system to achieve what you want, content.
Indeed. Yeah. Final one on the list would be misunderstanding how an effective leader leads.
This sounds like a great one. Thank you.
Oh, well, let's see. So it's I think it's easy for leaders as senior managers to think that their role is to command, to direct, to tell. But actually, if leadership actually requires development, it requires support, encouragement, coaching of the workforce to become competent and capable of delivering the future state and being able to sustain that future state. And we don't get learning typically through command and telling.
No. The state that you've described as the perfect state does require time, doesn't it? And connection with people. So it is something that leaders need to take into account. And it needs contact as well, doesn't it? It needs people to be much more visible and close as leaders to their teams and workforce. Yeah.
And do you know what, that plays very nicely to my second point around this. Um, you know, one mistake we can make as leaders is not spending enough time in the gemba, i.e., where the work happens, engaging with people, seeing the challenges, seeing the work with their own eyes, listening to it with their own ears. And without that connection, how could you possibly, with the organisation and the work as it's happening, how could you possibly be a good leader? Because you don't know. You're removed from it.
Indeed.
And I think the final point, and it goes back to this idea of, going to Gemba and supporting learning about themselves. And do they have the humility to accept the fact that actually, to be a good leader, you need to be constantly learning? Because the knowledge and theories that have got the organisation to where they are, however successful in a changing environment, will probably not be the thinking theories that you need moving forward.
And sometimes that's really difficult to get one's head around, isn't it?
Oh, indeed. I mean, and it's that natural thing, isn't it? As you move up the organisation, as you demonstrate your value and your worth and your ability to create success, surely that means you have less to learn. But I think it's actually the reverse.
Yes, because it's a bigger picture the higher up you get, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Warren, that's really hopeful. I do hope that listeners are finding this interesting and useful. And of course, please do get in touch if you'd like to talk any more about this with myself or with Warren. We'd be really delighted to talk to you. So thank you very much, Warren, for your time today. I think this is an excellent topic and really interesting.
My pleasure. Thanks, Suze.